Welcome back to the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, back for another one with OTAs in full swing, and it's a bit of a British invasion on the show today. Mike Clay, our regular guest host, is tied up with a move. So joining me today is Ross Miles, and I'm sure if you followed Pro Football Focus, you know Ross's work. And talking some offense, which is a bit rare for Ross, but one of the things we always say about us IDP folks is you have to be great on the offensive side of the ball as well to succeed in IDP. So Ross, no formal chit-chat today. We're just going to dive right into the information. And there's a lot of news coming out. You know, this is one of the times with the OTAs going where the news cycle actually is somewhat lively. It's gonna really die down for a little bit, and we'll be in the doldrums of summer pretty soon here. But lots to talk about, and I think probably topping the list, one of the most important things for fantasy purposes is Adrian Peterson. Well, you know, it looked a little dicey there. We know the saga. We know what took place in Peterson's past over this last year. But for a little while there, we had heard, okay, well, maybe he's going to be traded. That didn't happen in the draft. Then it's, well, maybe he's going to hold out. And lo and behold, he's with the Vikings now. He attended team OTAs. And better yet, what we're hearing out of beat reporters is that Peterson looks awesome. He's not showing any rust. So, you know, always assessing the landscape. And the Peterson thing, I think, is really important. You know, going back to our mock draft, Ross's staff mock draft, I had the number one pick overall, and I actually did pick Peterson. Now, this is before this news, but it's not the biggest shock, you know, this news came out. But I just want to kind of get your sense of where you stand on Peterson now. Are you buying that, you know, Peterson at what now, age 30, is still a viable elite fantasy option? You know, kind of what are you thinking about him for 2015?
He was the number 2 in my running back rankings. And when you took him first overall in the draft, Jeff, which I was going to bring up essentially, and I agree, I can see exactly why you'll do that. And this news definitely buoys your confidence. Adrian Peterson has proved he's a freak of nature. He can recover. He's basically been given a year off for his indiscretions to get totally healthy and come back. I honestly would not be surprised if he's the top scoring fantasy player at running back at the end of the season. And I might even bump him up to number 1 because, you know, Bell is facing that suspension. If he gets that reduced, it kind of makes it a little bit closer for me. But I could definitely see Peterson going 1, and I wouldn't fault people for taking him 1 in their draft.
Yeah, I obviously wouldn't fault people either. But, you know, the thing about Peterson in this particular offense, you know, is that the touch volume is going to be there. This is an improving team. I mean, love what Mike Zimmer has done so far, especially on that defensive side of the ball. This defense is continuing to improve. Anthony Barr there is as a rising talent. Michael Kendrick's little brother, Eric Kendricks, in the middle now, solidifying Harrison Smith. You know, and the list goes on and on and on the defensive side. Everson Griffin. You know, so the defense is going to certainly help the offense out. But the offense, hey, Teddy Bridgewater, one of our favorites, you know, fantasy kind of sleeper QB2s, if there is a such thing as a sleeper anymore. And you know, the thing about this offense is that Peterson will see more receptions. You know, I pulled up his stats as we're sitting here, and Peterson's max was 43 receptions in 2009. He also hit 40 in 2012. I mean, we could see 60, you know, and that's not an exaggeration by any means. So, you know, the value goes up, and Peterson, we know, one of the most explosive players. Doesn't matter if he has the ball in space or if he's in tight spaces. So, you know, really for me, I agree 100% that, you know, the time off, you know, is certainly possibly very beneficial to him from a health standpoint. And Peterson could be very dangerous this year. And I am seeing him slip. Actually, the other night I was in the Roto World mock draft for their draft guide magazine, and he slipped a little bit in that draft. In fact, if I remember correctly, DeMarco Murray went number 1 overall. We'll get to Murray in a minute, but yeah, Ross, there's just so much going on here. And I guess the other really big offseason story is Tom Brady, right? And okay, we talked about Tom Brady so many times on this show already. I'm not going to rehash it. We know the deal. You know, later on this month, we'll get some clarity in terms of whether or not the suspension will be reduced. The appeal date is set on June 23rd. We'll see if it gets pushed back. It looks like it's probably going to happen on June 23rd. So we'll see. But Ross, glowing reviews about Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Jimmy Garoppolo walks on water. His bowel movements smell like fresh baked cinnamon buns from everything you've been reading. But then yesterday happened, and he threw 5 picks yesterday, including 4 during the 2-minute drill. The same 2-minute drill where Brady went 14 of 15 with 1 drop. Boy, so obviously this is a big concern. And I'm going through actually right now on the site. I'm going through my team depth chart reviews. We have the main staff, the analysts on the PFF main side are unveiling all of their projected depth charts, and I'm just what's the fantasy spin team by team, and I'm actually writing up the Patriots, which will go live later on today. And one of the things that I mentioned, Ross, and I kind of want to, this is maybe more philosophical, in terms of fantasy mindset, but one of the things I mentioned, okay, if Brady's suspension stands, the Patriots have their bye in week 4. So that means that we don't get Brady until week 6. In turn, that means 5 weeks of ripple effect for the likes of Julian Edelman, Brandon LaFell, the running backs. Maybe not Rob Gronkowski. I think he's a little bit immune to anything. Like me or you could go out there and throw him the ball and he'll be fine.
Hey, I threw the ball yesterday, and I don't get it very far, I found out.
Yeah, and it probably looked like a dying duck like mine, right?
It's terrible. I cannot get a spiral. I'm ashamed. I'm actually ashamed.
Yeah. It's amazing how easy some of these pros make it look, but it's incredible. Yeah. But even with that, Gronkowski would still probably be dominant. But when you do the math here, that's almost 39% of a 13-game regular season, for fantasy purposes. So I guess ultimately here, we've exhausted you take Brady later and you get replacement value. We've exhausted that. Everybody knows how we feel about that. But how do we feel about the other players? That's the real key here. So, in terms of what you're thinking, Brandon LaFell, who's a popular sort of upside guy a lot of people have been looking at. Julian Edelman, obviously a PPR mainstay and decent value in standard scoring leagues. By the way, I have a bone to pick. All you people who are calling standard scoring leagues non-PPR, you need to back that one up and reverse this. Go back to standard scoring leagues for me, please. But Ross, what are you thinking about these guys? Are they moving on your draft board at all? Edelman, LaFell, maybe LeGarrette Blount. I mean, obviously he's suspended for the first game of the season, but that's not a big deal. So are they moving?
No, not particularly. I mean, obviously, we've heard a lot of good about Garoppolo. Now we've heard some bad. I mean, that's kind of what I expect. We've talked about it, but I'm expecting a replacement level performance from him, and that's how I've based my rankings for Edelman, who currently sits at 16 in wide receiver. I think I've got LaFell just down in the early 40s. So I mean, LaFell is someone I'm not quite as high on as maybe yourself and Mike, who definitely. He came on, but the thing is, I'm an Aaron Dobson fan a little bit as well, and he got a few positive reviews today. So I'm just waiting. We've talked about it. We're blue in the face. Brady's coming back. Brady will play at a quarterback 1 level in a Bill Belichick offense, and he's going to score points. And you want to be strong late in the season. Maybe your team tanks a little bit in the first 4 weeks. Not tanks, but you go 2-2 because you've got some Patriots players. You get priority in the waivers. Come the second half of the season when those guys are flying, so is your team with those priority waiver pickups.
Yeah, I guess we are a little bit different there on LaFell. I see LaFell as even a borderline wide receiver 2 with certainly wide receiver 2 upside, weekly wide receiver 1 upside. We showed it last year. He gets the target volume, multiple games there, especially in the middle part of the season where he was top in double-digit targets. And he offers that sort of skill profile that maybe Dobson might offer, but really there's nobody else there who is capable of doing that. And the one thing that we've mentioned this before, this used to be a knock on LaFell, that people would just sort of afterthought say, oh yeah, well he's a good blocker. Well, he's a good blocker, so that means he's going to stay on the field. Like that's a good thing, and it's certainly a very good thing for his fantasy value. So certainly a little bit of a split there. But and by the way, when we reference these rankings. We're referencing our individual rankings, but you can certainly check out the individual and the consensus over at Pro Football Focus. We're continually updating these in the offseason. Actually, mine are probably due for an update in the next couple days here. So keep your eyes peeled on that. Ross, more stuff, so much more. Miami. Actually, just covered Miami yesterday in my depth chart review. I'm starting with the AFC East. And a lot of news coming out about this wide receiver core. We have actually a really rejuvenated wide receiver core, the acquisition of Kenny Stills in the offseason, signing Greg Jennings, now older, but still somewhat, he's got some gas in the tank. Jarvis Landry, a lot of people very high on Landry this year entering the season. And then, of course, Devontae Parker in the draft. Now, just before we started the show, news came across the wire. Devontae Parker underwent foot surgery this morning. This is Friday, June 5th. And he's very likely to open up the camp on the PUP. It was a screw replacement in his foot. So that's not good news. I'm somebody, actually, I've been touting Parker. Parker, 3 inches taller than Stills and 4 inches taller than Landry and Jennings. So he's got the size, he's got the speed, he can play outside, he can play inside. He has a my ball mentality, everything and anything you'd want. But this is a big setback. But either way, there's this whole notion they're going to use an interchangeable wide receiver setup. So you could see Landry, primarily you're going to see him in the slot, but you could see him on the outside. They're going to be shifting players around. I mean, you can see Stills in the slot on the outside. And Ross, this isn't a huge surprise. The laser offense, which I hope that becomes coined at some point. The laser offense is a derivative of the Chip Kelly offense, which, we know Chip Kelly prioritizes movable chess pieces at the wide receiver position, guys who can go inside and outside. That's the exact reason why all signs pointed to Nelson Aguilar in the draft, and that's exactly who they picked. So either way, the question here, long story short, Dolphins wide receivers, are you targeting any of them? Or are you just sort of leaving them all for everybody else? I mean, is there a player out of that bunch that stands out to you who you kind of have to own, or if he's there, you're going to prioritize him over other players, or are you a little wary of the situation in Miami?
I'm pretty impassive. I like the offense they've got, but I think some of the players are just getting drafted a little bit too high. I mean, you've talked about how much people are loving Jarvis Landry this year, and I like him too, but he's a possession receiver, which captures upside. I can't see him reaching wide receiver 1 levels. I think he's a mid-low end possession wide receiver 2, especially in PPR leagues. As for Devontae Parker, again, he's someone people are really hyping, so he often gets picked before I'm willing to grab him. Tends to be the case, I'm really quite a stickler for drafting by my board and taking value, and I feel that there's enough hype about the Miami offense that I don't end up with those players on my roster, because other people who, we can talk about, someone like an Eric Decker is someone you guys have talked about as well recently. He gets massively underdrafted. I could pick him up a round or 2 later and get possibly similar production.
Yeah, I 100% agree on Decker, and following your board, it's a great piece of advice that, seems so logical, but a lot of people won't do that, or building the board, I think, is probably the most important thing. Instead of just going out and using somebody else's rankings, I mean, if you don't want to make rankings of your own, use the rankings, but still build your board. Know where you're going to pick players in certain spots, or who you're going to prioritize, what sort of tiers, what sort of positions and places, but you have to be, of course, flexible. But Landry, you bring up obviously some great points there. Possession guy, sure. In fact, if we looked last season, he had 84 catches, but he also had 758 yards. That's pretty low. And his average depth of target was 5.5, and that was the second lowest among all wide receivers. The only one with a lower average depth of target was Tavon Austin. So that's really concerning. And obviously, how much is he going to get used in the red zone? Height's a factor there. So right now, just pulling up some of the information in terms of ADP, Jarvis Landry's going at 609. So tail end of the 6th round. For me, that's entirely too early. He's going before Vincent Jackson. Yeah, he's going
too early.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going before Vincent Jackson. He's going before Kevin White. He's going before Roddy White, I would take there. Oh, boy. Charles Johnson's going at 801. Folks, I don't know what you're seeing there, but anyway, it's too early. And even though Parker's going to potentially open up camp on the PUP, I mean, for me, I'm still throwing that dart, especially where he's coming in the 10th round right now, ADP wise. He's right around Kenny Stills. Ross, how do you think about Kenny Stills?
I don't mind him. Again, if he falls to me at the right spot, and I'm just trying to look at my rankings while I'm talking here, but he is a deep threat. He is going to probably man that role until Parker's back. But obviously, I like you. I do like Parker. See, Parker was sitting at 39 in my rankings. So I think that's pretty high for a rookie who's obviously going to be there with injury. But Kenny Stills 59. So Kenny Stills is the kind of guy I'm probably not going to end up drafting unless other people pass on him. He's going to be. I tend to build my wide receiver core earlier. I'm finding in this draft, in this year's redraft league. So if I've already stacked 4 or 5 in my roster, I'm playing IDP leagues. I'm probably not looking at Stills when he's coming off the board.
Yeah, and I think your ranking is pretty much spot on. I have him as a wide receiver 5 type, and that's right where you have him ranked. I don't know if he's necessarily as much of the deep threat that people are consistently saying, because last year 12.8 average depth of target, which means he's seeing shorter targets as well. I think it's probably better to call him a big play threat. Because he's not just sort of a 9-route guy, boom, down the field, and that's all he does, a la maybe Mike Wallace or something like that. Not necessarily entirely Mike Wallace is like that, but that sort of type player. Stills offers an interesting skill set, and obviously, if you're in super deep leagues, then yeah, I'm gonna consider that, because I do like this Miami offense. I do like Ryan Tannehill to take a step forward and continue to develop in this laser offense. So
yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit of Stills' tape when he came out of the draft, because he wasn't really a hyped receiver, but he had production. I think he was Alabama off the top of my head. And obviously, when you get picked up to play for the Saints as a wide receiver, your ears immediately perk up. And he was a guy, when you watch tape on him coming out of college, he just looked like he won. He just won routes, he won the ball, and he just made things happen. So, I think, like you say, he isn't that true speedster deep threat, but he's got enough speed to get up on people, and he's that my ball mentality we talked about with Devontae Parker. He does get up there and make the catch. So that's kind of where his value is. So I can't dissuade people from him as a wide receiver 5, but he's not someone I'm going to aggressively target.
Yeah, I think that's a completely fair evaluation. Going to his former team, New Orleans, a lot of news coming out right now about C.J. Spiller. The big talk is getting C.J. Spiller the ball in space. And in fact, actually, the Baton Rouge Advocate predicts that Spiller is going to see more touches than Mark Ingram this year. Now, boom, ears perk up. What? More touches and getting the ball in space. The last time we really saw Spiller used correctly, under the Marone regime, he wasn't used correctly. Spiller's not a guy who's going to pound between the tackles. And that's sort of what they were trying to do. I mean, they're trying to use him in that sort of maybe Jamal Charles-like role as a runner, not as a receiver. And really, Spiller, you got to get him the ball in space. He is, electric in space and still has that ability, no doubt. But, I guess here's the question. And Spiller, by the way, number 6 in fantasy scoring in 2012. Mark Ingram last season, number 14 in fantasy scoring. That's in standard scoring leagues. But the question, Ross, is, okay, Ingram going at pick 307, Spiller going at pick 506. Should this be flip-flopped, or is this the case? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, I've been fooled twice by Spiller, and twice is 2013, 2014. Is this a year where it changes? Should we really still believe? Right? Don't stop believing in Spiller, or what are you thinking about this guy this year?
You see, I'm the guy that's been burnt by Ingram. Until I've believed in Ingram. I've drafted him heavily previously, or pursued him heavily when he was expected to break out, and never really had him when he's been worth anything. So for me, Ingram currently sits at 14. I've got Spiller down at 27. I do like Spiller, but I've never been burnt by Spiller. I haven't actually managed to pick him up because, again, because of the excitement that gets behind a player like him, he can get hyped. And I've said it before, I'm a guy who drafts by my board. If I've got someone above, if I've got Ingram above Spiller and they're both there, I'm taking Ingram kind of thing. And Spiller's always been overdrafted, I think, by some of my league mates, and it's not a guy I've picked up. But I am excited by him because he has got that, top end speed, breakaway ability. But all the signs are pointing that New England's a much more run focused offense. So, all this talk about how is Spiller going to out-touch Ingram if they're going to be running the ball rather than passing it.
Yeah, I guess in part here, the question is he a post type sleeper? Ingram was certainly that last year. Last year he was a player you could get on the cheap, and obviously did really well. You can get an RB2, a higher end RB2. He was 14 overall. Later in your draft, you're doing exactly what you should be doing, especially the way that RBs are going off the board. I mean, yes, we're hearing a lot of things. A lot of people are saying running back is deeper this year. Go do some mock drafts and then tell me if you agree, because it seems like you get to a certain point, and again, just like we've seen over the last several years, running back falls off a complete cliff. So, it's especially in standard scoring leagues, it's really tough this year. So if you can score those guys like Ingram later on that produce that well, that's great. And see, the question ultimately here with Spiller is he going to be a post-type sleeper, or is the hype going to catch up with him again, and then we see his ADP rise maybe up into the early fourth or perhaps even into the third round by the time we get to August? I guess time's going to tell on that one, but the news is really intriguing. Now, keep in mind, this is the time of tropes. Every quarterback, it has the best throwing motion out there. Everybody is looking great. No rust. Everybody has these, the great workout ethic over the offseason. All of that. So we'll be careful here, and it's always, keep that in mind when it comes from a beat reporter. It's not coming from the coaching staff, so it's take with a grain of salt, but still interesting news nonetheless. Ross, another running back, interesting news in Baltimore. Justin Forsett. We saw finally really a breakout season for Forsett later on in his career. Obviously not a spring chicken. And now he's kind of solidified as the lead guy in that backfield, entering a season where Mark Trestman comes in as the offensive coordinator. And, there's reports now that Forsett's receptions could double. Okay, Forsett had 44 receptions last year. If they double, that's 88 receptions. And this isn't like outlandish to think that he could push 75, 80 receptions, because in Trestman's history, we've seen 7 different times where running backs have gone over 69 receptions. And Matt Forte, of course, did that twice, but some interesting names there. Some old school fantasy football players will remember, Michael Pittman and Charlie Garner. They're not that old school, but older school, I should say. And so, hey, Forsett, all right, he's coming off the board at 301. If he gets 88 receptions, that's too low, right?
It is. I've currently got him sitting at 17 in my rankings. So he's kind of a mid-tier running back 2, but he scored like a running back 1 last season. And with those added receptions, he can definitely return himself to that kind of group. But, one of the things we've talked about this offseason in podcasts and other websites talking to is the fact that although running back seems kind of modeled at the top, there is the drop-off. And, he's part of that model for me. Once you get, the fact that we're even having to tell people about Peterson's number 1, you're talking about how DeMarco Murray went number 1 in the draft. I have him at number 10 in my rankings, so there is a lot of, it's so tight in that second tier behind the top 2 or 3, I think, this year, that Forsett, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up as the 5th best running back this year or something because of those receptions.
Yeah, and let's be fair here. I'm not saying he's going to get 88 receptions. That's pretty crazy. Would it absolutely shock me? No, but in the same right, we're going to see more receptions for him. There's no doubt in my mind there. That's just the way that offense runs. And, one of these strategies that could be viable, because Mike and I have been talking, kind of one of the approaches that I've been taking in a lot of these drafts is trying to get my hands on one of the top 10 receivers and running backs in the first 2 rounds. Now, that can be challenging if you're the number 1 pick overall, because the well dries up. Hey, your next pick isn't until 24, and at that point, those 20 players could be gone, right? So it's pretty challenging. But if you're right in the middle, you grab a top end running back and a top end wide receiver in your first 2 picks, and then you come back around and Forsett is sitting there. That's pretty ideal. You knock out a running back, especially if you're in a half-point PPR league. You get a lot of value there, a lot of bang for the buck with a player like that. But I do agree, that by all means, he's not a clear top tier running back. I mean, certainly capable of putting up top 10 fantasy points, but he's not in that group. And Murray, as you mentioned, sort of at that back end, that tail end of that top tier. I agree with you. I have him down there as well. And news out of Philadelphia would actually further support this because, while there was original talk that, maybe it's going to be mostly Murray and then Matthews ends up getting about 100 touches roughly. Now we're hearing out of Philadelphia that the plan is for the Eagles to divide carries between Murray and Matthews. That could be problematic, especially if you take Murray number one overall. Not saying that both players can't produce fantasy value, but for me, if this is a fairly even divide, Ross, I'd have to have both players as RB2s.
Oh, I don't disagree, Jeff. I mean, the way I look at it is Ryan Matthews is a good running back. He's capable, and he has shown it in his career, producing high-end running back 2, maybe even low-end running back 1 numbers when given a full workload. We all know how good DeMarco Murray is. And in a high-tempo offense, it makes sense to spell your running back, to share the carries out, keep them fresh. This is an offense that turns up the tempo and wears teams down. And if you've got 2 competent running backs that can do the job, why not split the carries? This is a team sport. It's not about egos. Chip Kelly doesn't really care if DeMarco Murray is a top fantasy back or not. He wants his team to win games, and if by doing that he has to use 12 carries versus 10 from Ryan Matthews, that's the way he's going to do it. And I agree. I think you have to look for the upside in Murray. He showed he's such an explosive player, so you have to try and keep him at the end of that running back 1 tier. But if we see this happening more and more, he's going to have to drop.
Yeah, and honestly, can you fault them? It's a pretty wise approach. Part of the reason, we saw maybe a little bit of a decline. Murray was still awesome last year, but 392 carries. Okay, yeah, he tailed off at the end of the season, no doubt about it. So keep him fresh is a wise decision for Chip Kelly and the Eagles. A wise decision for everybody playing fantasy is to start playing daily fantasy. And hey, you wouldn't know it by listening to our podcast or following our Twitter feeds, but it's baseball season. Baseball season is finally here. It's in full swing, and huge cash prizes are being won every day at DraftKings.com, the official fantasy sports partner of Major League Baseball. Daily fantasy, no season-long commitments. That's the worst part about fantasy baseball. Your fantasy season is wrapping up just as fantasy football is starting. You can't pay attention to both. But you don't have that problem in daily fantasy. Why wait to the end of the season as well when you can win big today, tomorrow, the next day? It's like a new season every time you play. You're never stuck with injured players, poor performances, working the waiver wire, none of that stuff. You pick 2 pitchers and 8 position players, and you stay under that cap, and you could win huge cash prizes. In fact, Ross, our buddy Peter Jennings won $1 million last year playing fantasy baseball at DraftKings.com. Hundreds of thousands of fantasy sports fans sports fans just like you have cashed in DraftKings.com tournaments. Now it's your turn. Hurry up, get over to DraftKings.com right now and use the promo code PFF to play for free to win part of $300 million being paid out this baseball season. DraftKings.com, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Use promo code PFF for a free entry right now over at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com. And Ross, also DraftKings, the official sponsor of the Belmont Stakes. We potentially have a Triple Crown winner in American Pharoah. I don't know if it's going to happen. This horse is very talented, but it should be pretty interesting to watch. Ross and I both like the ponies on the side, but this isn't a horse racing show, and it's not a baseball show, so let's get back to football.
Can I just make a quick? I want to say something. That if you're playing DraftKings this year, you're not going to have to worry about splitting carries between DeMarco Murray and where you have to pick him, right? There could be some incredible value in Ryan Matthews this year. If first few weeks, if they're going to split carries, it's that kind of thing. That's why I love daily. Like these kind of little opportunities. It reinvigorates me in fantasy all the time. I'm looking forward to daily already.
Yeah, it's not just baseball and football. I mean, it's everything. Some people out there are really into NASCAR. They know their stuff. You have NASCAR. I mean, you have hockey. You have basketball.
Soccer's kicking off over here. It's getting big over here. Like people are talking to me about gambling on fantasy playing soccer as well.
And we also have, college fantasy football is really getting big. And I actually wanted to talk about that real quick before we get back into things. This past season, we've launched college football focus. So, tons of analysis there. We use a lot of that data to produce our rookie rankings pre-draft. And then during the draft, Mike Clay and I did 11,000 words in 3 days on the madness that ensued, live blogging the draft and using a lot of that information there too. But one of the CFF staffers is now also going to be working for us doing exclusively college fantasy football. And his name's Wes Huber. He's rolling out some really great stuff right now. He's doing a position by position, conference by conference player preview series, which now he's starting in the American Athletic Conference. So some of the smaller schools, including Temple, right now, and just rolling through this series. There's nothing like this out there, folks. Like, I know some of you are interested in playing college fantasy football and maybe playing DFS, or if you're in Devy Dynasty leagues, this is a wealth of information that you're not going to find anywhere else. So make sure you head over to the site and check that out right now. The college fantasy football preview series from Wes Huber, just absolutely awesome.
I've actually played in one college redraft league about 3 years ago, and it was awesome because of the difference between the divisions and the quality of football, but it doesn't matter when it comes down to points. I had a lot of fun. It was quite tough being a Brit, obviously not having the access to as much college football information and not being able to watch the games. As we'll drum it into you, watching the games is such a big advantage when you're playing fantasy, really getting a feel for what players are doing. But it was great. I think I even had Devontae Parker. I'm trying to remember my team. I swear Marquise Lee and Devontae Parker would have been my two wide receivers. I went wide receiver heavy in that league.
Yeah, and it's challenging. It really is to know all those different players, especially when you're playing fantasy football, NFL fantasy football at the same time. But Ross, one of the best places to do it, though, is if you just sort of want to dip your toe in the water a little bit, play daily. Go over to DraftKings and enter in a couple, maybe 50-50s or something like that, and see how you do. The best part is Wes is going to be doing DFS analysis every week, and again, the market's flooded with NFL analysis for DFS. It's out there. We have tons of it. All the big sites do. But really, how many sites actually have college? So this is a significant advantage. It's something that is going to be behind our paywall, though. So you sign up. $29.99 gets you access to all of the stuff behind our paywall when that goes up in the summertime. It gets you access to our draft guide too, which of course I should mention. You can get a PDF copy of our draft guide right now for $4.99, or you could just sign up as a subscriber and get it for free. And you could actually do it even one up. If you want to do all this together, go over to DraftKings and make an initial deposit using our promo code PFF, and you're going to get the subscription for free. You're going to get the draft guide for free. It's like Oprah Winfrey. You're getting it. Everybody's getting it for free if you go over there and do that right now. But awesome information there. If you want a paper copy of the draft guide as well, you can pick one up. Just head over to our website. You can also look us up on Amazon. $7.49 for that draft guide, and it's just amazing information. But nobody's going to have this college stuff though. So you have a significant advantage over the masses, and it's really well worth it using all of the CFF data that really Ross, it's one of those things. We have access to this on the back end, but it's like I can't show any other human being this or lose my life. No, just kidding. But still, it's like it's just amazing. I wish that everybody could see all of the data that we have. It's just really incredible work that CFF has been doing. Ross, while we're talking about this, you and I are in this league. And it's a dynasty league. It's a big league. It's an industry league. It's actually Sirius XM sponsored. So the Sirius XM Dynasty League. And Ross, fill everybody in on the format really quickly here. It is a full IDP team in addition to offense. So you have, defensive tackle required. You have cornerback required. So those positions are split up. And it's a huge roster. And each
is it 40-man or 50-man rosters? Yeah. So basically, the way it was just hinting, Jeff was hinting is basically we have 32 teams in the league, but we're split into 2 divisions of 16, which are almost like separate entities. So me and Jeff are actually in opposite conferences. So it's exactly like in the NFL, the 2 conferences meet to decide an overall champion, but obviously they could have similar players, as you'd expect champions to have similar teams with well-performing players. But it's a great concept, and there's some really smart people playing in this league.
Yeah, and so 16 teamers, essentially we're each playing in a 16-team league. The 2 teams who win each league meet up in the championship. Now, the challenge here, obviously, industry folks know what they're doing, and 16 teamers is really tough when you go through rookie drafts. So we're in the midst of our rookie draft right now, and I want to just kind of go through these a little bit, go through pick by pick, kind of who you grabbed, who I grabbed, and give some folks sort of some of the thought process behind these picks. So looking through here in the first rounds, Ross, did you have a first round pick? I'm not even actually seeing a first round.
I did. You see, this was a really interesting spot for me. I was picking at 109, and if you look at my roster, I am really, really short on running backs. I'm doing it. So my roster, I'll just bring it up and give you a quick rundown. So I've got a quarterback. I've got Cam Newton, and he's backed up by Teddy Bridgewater, who I was obviously very high on last year, and I really pumped for. Wide receiver, I'm also pretty stacked. I really went after last year's draft class. I've got Odell Beckham. I've also got Des Bryant. I had Josh Gordon. He's still there, but obviously he's not adding any value. But Alan Hearns, Cody Latimer. You can see that I was really attacking the draft, trying to get some good players in my team last year. But unfortunately, at running back, it was a lot murkier. Giovanni Bernard and Trent Richardson were basically my flagship running backs, and Darren McFadden was kind of an add-on. I got a little bit lucky with Justin Forset's season last year. So coming into this draft, I was quite clear in my mind that picking 9 overall, I'm missing out on the wide receivers, but I'm already stacked. So I'm looking at the running backs. I know Gordon's gone. I know Gurley's gone. So I'm looking at Yeldon, ideally, maybe Abdullah. And I get on the clock at 109. And our friend Chad Parsons, who was a PFF writer for a while, now writes for Football Guys, got in touch and he just said Lamar Miller for 109. And I sat there and it's my first draft of the year, and I'm just thinking through, like, is this what I want? I need a running back, so it's the perfect trade for me. I had other offers. The first thing I did is look at my dynasty rankings. Miller sits there at 14 in running back, Abdullah at 20. That was my choice, Abdullah or Miller. Miller's high, so I pulled the trigger. And I had to just hope that some more running backs fell to me in later rounds, which, as the draft went on, they did.
Yeah, it looks like you grabbed David Cobb there at 209. An interesting pick. I don't know. I would have been really tempted. Chad Parsons actually grabbed Rashad Perryman in that spot. But Tevin Coleman goes the pick after. Amir Abdullah goes at 113 to, of course, Sigmund Bloom. I think, big Amir Abdullah fan. Eric Kendricks goes in the first round on your side of the draft, too. And I'm not really crazy about that pick. Need linebacker or not. You can get a linebacker later on in this draft. There's no sense in reaching at that point. But, for me, I probably would have went and flipped a coin between Coleman and Abdullah. For me, it's probably Abdullah. I've been, on record as not being huge on Coleman in Atlanta. But I can't fault you because you get a guy there. But I guess here's the question is, are you concerned at all about Jay Ajayi?
A little bit. And that was in my head, I'm hoping, I wonder if he's going to fall because of his knee. And I was hoping upon hope that he was going to fall. I was quite worried actually when I made 109, because if you notice, Sigmund picked at 108. Oh no, he comes in later, sorry. I was really looking for Ajayi to fall, and he doesn't. Unfortunately, he doesn't get quite to me. I'm picking at 209. He gets selected 206. At that point, there's still quite a few interesting running backs. David Johnson's on the board, Duke Johnson's on the board, and David Cobb is on the board. I'm going to pick Cobb, but after David Johnson goes 207 to Tony Sincotta, who's one of the hosts on Sirius Radio, Sigmund Bloom traded up to get in front of me, and I know from hearing it and listening to their work, that he works with Matt Waldman, and Waldman's a Cobb guy, and I was a little bit wary, but luckily he stepped in and took Duke Johnson, so Cobb fell to me, so I was really chuffed with that. I'm a lot higher than most people on Cobb. I've got Cobb in my rookie rankings at 10. The reason is I was a little bit burnt last year on Bishop Sankey, but in a bad way, really, because I did not like Sankey. Many people had him number one running back, even one in the class at times. He was really hyped. It's hard to imagine that now, but if you go back and have a look, Sankey was a hype player, and I just did not like him. I did not like him. I ended up bumping him up a bit higher than I felt I should have, just because I was like, am I right when everyone else is wrong, kind of thing. And I don't believe in Sankey at all. Do not like him. So Cobb wins that job for me, and he's going to start from week 1. I'm happy to take him at 209.
Bold statement. I do think that Johnson's an absolute steal at 208, though. I can't believe you fell that far on your side. So let's just shift over to my side really quickly here. And I actually had the 1-6 pick. And one of the things that took place behind the scenes is I was actually offered from somebody in the league a trade, and I tweeted this out. Somebody offered who was it? Barry Church. Okay, Barry Church for my 1-6 and a 4th round from next year. Okay, let me say that again. Barry Church, the safety from the Cowboys, who is like the number 10 safety, for my 1-6 pick. I almost fell off my chair laughing, and I didn't know whether or not it was an insult. But obviously, I turned that down. Safeties are a dime a dozen, folks. You don't need to draft them. You can stream all season long. But Ross, at 1-6, I was really fortunate. I was sitting there. I see Todd Gurley go first, Melvin Gordon go second, Amari Cooper go third. No problems with that. But then Jameis Winston, which – okay, it's really early, but then again, it is a 16-teamer, and so quarterbacks are fewer and farther between, so that bumps the value up. But it's still a little early for my taste. Then Nelson Aguilar goes, and I'm sitting there.
I saw that. Sorry.
You got to be kidding.
I know.
Kevin White. Automatic.
I did look in at your draft. I have actually been keeping a sneaky peek on what you've been up to. And I saw that Aguilar went just in front of me. I was like, oh, Jeff's going to be disappointed. And then I realized that Kevin White was sitting there. And I was like, that's Jeff's number 1 receiver. He's probably doing a backflip right now. He went 3 in our draft. And
it was
Winston went 7 in my draft. So, yeah, Winston was a popular player.
Yeah. In a 16-teamer, it makes sense. But, I really need running backs. I do. But here's the thing about the philosophy here is I went into this draft and I said, I'm not going to pick by need. I'm going to pick by best player available, and I do the same exact thing in the second round. In the second round, I'm sitting there, and actually Eric Kendricks goes at 207 in our side of the draft, which I think is perfectly fair. I think that's exactly where he should go as the 23rd pick overall. But number 22, I'm 206. And, the running backs are already gone. Duke Johnson's not sitting there. David Johnson, David Cobb, they've all gone. Jay Ajayi's gone. And I really don't feel the need to draft IDP in this kind of a league because you can outplay everybody. You build up a stronger offense, and you can certainly contend even by working the waiver wire a week ahead of everybody. You can outplay them on the defensive side of the ball. So, Ross, I grabbed Philip Dorsett. And I got a little bit, some people have been asking, well, what about Dante Moncrief? What about Duron Carter? And my response really is, if they were that high on Moncrief, if they were that high on Carter, why would they spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver when they have obvious needs on the defensive side of the ball? They were really high on this kid. He was probably extraordinarily higher on their board than anybody else left, so they grabbed him. And boy, oh boy, with really one of the rising quarterbacks, obviously an elite level fantasy quarterback, maybe not an elite level on the field quarterback just yet, but he will be, Andrew Luck. That's pretty dangerous, and it was really hard for me to pass up at that point. So I go best player available again.
Yep, I mean, I can't follow that opinion. I mean, in my next pick, I do something similar. I took Devin Smith, who was wide receiver in New York. I was picking 41st overall, I believe. He's 18 on my board, and I was staggered that he was still available. Obviously, I've mentioned that I'm pretty good at wide receiver, and it isn't really a need. But to me, he's the best player on my board. I was hoping that Josh Robinson was going to fall to me. He gets taken just a few picks before me. It was probably Sigmund. Let me have a look. Maybe it wasn't. I think someone else got him, but he does go just before, and it left me in that position where I wanted to pick Devin Smith at 41st player overall. Which, I saw DeAndre's.
You passed on Robinson. Robinson goes 2 picks later to our buddy Matt Deutsch, who runs the show over there at SiriusXM.
So I think that was it. That was my decision between the two. I looked at it and I had Smith 18, and I think I had Robinson 24 in my rookie rankings. So they're both great value. But I just think there's something about Smith. He's a guy some of the PFF guys picked up on, CFF guys picked up on. Looking at their analysis, they talked about how he's used almost exclusively as a deep threat. And they said he is one of the few guys in this class that can actually use his speed to really burn deep people. And people are running away from some of that New York offense like a plague. I think that's a disrespectful thing to do to a Chan Gailey offense. Ryan Fitzpatrick is waiting in the wings if Geno Smith can't get it done. And Fitzpatrick can be productive, and I think Smith has got every opportunity to be a productive part of that team. And, maybe he's not a wide receiver one, but 41st overall, I don't need him to start right away. If he can refine his game a little bit and learn a bit more, actually run some routes, I think he's got a lot of value.
Well, that's the thing is he CFF was even saying that he does have that element to his game. He is a little bit more polished than people realize, but he just was asked to run the deep routes last season, but he can do more than that. And I think that's a great pick right there. Now, I actually did take Josh Robinson in the third round on my side. And the reason why, as I've been saying, and if you've heard me, I've said this in as many outlets as possible, is he's a clone almost of Frank Gore. If Frank Gore and Maurice Jones-Drew were merged together and cloned, it would be Josh Robinson. And so obviously he starts the season behind Gore. Gore, ageless and really good value in a lot of fantasy drafts right now. But if anything happens, I believe Josh Robinson is the best running back on that team backing up Gore. And he could step into a really good situation. Hey, we saw what Boom Herron did last year, and Boom Herron, not really the most talented running back, but he took advantage of the situation. And it's a team that does like to run the football as much as people don't realize that they do. So do like that pick. Ross, fourth round, and you go with Trey Flowers.
Yes, This was a slightly frustrating. This was one of the only times I felt a little bit frustrated. Not too bad. I like my offense, and I'm still thinking offense first. Like you, I like to go IDP late, really late. And I looked at. I obviously wanted Randy Gregory, who's a player I really like. He goes off the board to Bloom at pick 45 for overall 313. Odigizua goes straight after him, the New York Giants guy, who I have high as well, 314. So then I'm like, oh no, some of these defensive ends are going. But Trey Flowers, to me, is a guy that isn't getting a lot of love, but I think he's got a future, especially in New England where he landed. He's another guy that the CFF guys really, really like, and that's probably influenced me because these are guys I trust their opinion. He ranks out exceptionally well for not only his pass rush productivity, no, I said that, not sacks, and also his play against the run. He ranks as the top 5 defender on numerous categories, and that just made my ears perk up. And when I look at Rob Ninkovich at 31, a guy that's never recorded more than 8 sacks in his career, and in fact has scored 8 sacks in his last 3 seasons, I can see Trey Flowers developing into that kind of player where he's good against the run, he's versatile. He isn't going to get double-digit sacks, I don't think, but Ninkovich is a guy who consistently ranks right on the cusp of D1 value in IDP leagues, and I felt that was too much to turn up from because my team was a little bit weak at defensive end. I think I'm rocking Demontre Moore, Marcel Darius, and William Golson. So that was the pick I had to make there. I felt it was more of a need pick than an absolute board pick.
Yeah, and he's got a little bit of Michael Bennett, I think, to his game to a degree. And, looking back to his numbers last year, I don't know, maybe he could be a sack threat. 61 quarterback pressures and 365 pass rush snaps. That was the most productive on a per snap basis out of all the draft eligible 3 defensive ends. I mean, so there's certainly some potential there.
He just didn't get home. He just didn't get home. I thought he got 6 sacks, I think. So I mean, you can. That's probably why he's not ranked quite as highly as maybe I have him. I think he's my 5th defensive end right now.
Yeah, sack conversion is going to go up and down. It's going to vary by team, vary by opposition, and it's going to vary from player to player by season. We're going to see typically about 17.5%, 18% of those sacks converted to, or those pressures converted to sacks. But I've seen players, who are converting much higher. Robert Quinn last year, 2 years ago, 2013, was converting well over 20%. And those numbers are going to always sort of level out over the long term. You're not going to continue to convert that many sacks. But still, the fact that he's getting there, that's what you like. You love the disruption. And so, yeah, a solid pick there, especially at a really thin defensive end position. For me, I go actually, you know what? Before we get to me, you did have another 4th round pick, and I actually really like this pick, but it's a pick that's going to sit on your taxi squad, certainly, unless bad things happen. Brett Hundley. And Brett Hundley, for me, I know a lot of people always raw, this, that, and the third. He's raw, yes, but he has a huge ceiling, and he may have landed in one of the best spots possible for him. Not for a lot of other players. It would have been a bad spot for some other players, but for Hundley, he can sit there, he can develop, and that's what the Packers are known to do. This kid has an enormous ceiling, and potentially down the road now, not this year, not next year, not even 3 years from now probably, but down the road, he could potentially be a fantasy asset. It's just how long are you willing to sit on this guy?
Yeah, I mean, this is 100% shows exactly what I mean about picking by your board. I looked at my board, and he was my top-rated player. I'd seen Bryce Petty go before him. I already said I own Cam Newton and I own Teddy Bridgewater, so there is absolutely no need for me to make this pick. But I look at the players being taken around him. You've said I take IDP almost solely for need. Or really late. Round 4 for an IDP is rare for me. I just had to make a move on one. So I'm not taking IDP there. I don't like the wide receivers on the board at this point. I've already stacked. And now I've added Miller, and now I've added Cobb to Justin Forsett, backed up by McFadden. I felt that was a strong enough running back core to get me through. I didn't need to make a pick here. I just invested in Huntley. If he does pan out, that's I can flip that for a round 2, maybe even a round more in the future. All it takes is an injury, him to flash something, and suddenly that guy's value skyrockets, and I'm sitting on another first round pick in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to wrap up your draft here, you get in the 5th round, you take Eric Rowe. Potentially could. What's that?
Utah boy.
Utah boy.
Yeah, we're alum. We've got to get that man.
Utah guy, another Utah guy named Eric Weddle in addition. Potentially could see some time at safety, very versatile player, and a player who has a nice tackle ceiling. So if you're going to take a flyer on somebody, and he could see immediate playing time as well. So you got to like that pick if you haven't need at that position.
Yeah, I'd seen Byron Jones go just before him, and I think maybe another cornerback had gone, or maybe they go in the next round. So I don't like drafting cornerbacks, but I did. Again, it's a position we have to start, and I did need one. I felt so. I felt like I'm a little bit weak at safety, not as strong as I'd like to be. So I did look at the likes of James Sample, some of the other safeties, Ibrahim Campbell, but I just felt that cornerback was weaker for me, and again, I'm picking more on need at this point of the draft.
Yeah, and Clayton Gathers is the other, and he went in the 6th round. Sample went in their late 5th. Really, there's only one safety worth any sort of pick this year, Landon Collins, and I think in the 2nd to 3rd round is very fair, and that's where he went on both sides for us. And you wrap things up with the
undrafted free agent. Yeah, this is another Matt Waldman guy. He's one of Matt Waldman's favorite undrafted free agents. If you haven't, I'm going to plug someone else, but Matt Waldman's RSP is an excellent read and excellent buy. I had a look at that, and he says he's like a 6'3" guy. He's got some incredible cone times. I'm not overly impressed by the San Diego Chargers wide receiving core. I'm pretty good with Keenan Allen, but with the rest of them, I think there's a chance for that guy to win a job. I mean, they kept around Vincent Brown for long enough. Malcolm's going to start there. Someone is going to emerge there, I'm hoping. Phillip Rivers is a damn good quarterback, and I just thought that's a flyer pick in the last round.
All right, Ross, he's not Voldemort. You can say his name. It was Tyrell Williams who goes with the pick there, this mystery man that Ross was alluding to. But yeah, a lot of potential there, in a depth chart that is sort of in flux. And yes, a Matt Waldman favorite. Go out and pick that RSP up. It's a great resource. Really for anyone and everybody, anyone and all who, regardless of what you play, even if you just play in redraft leagues, it's still a huge resource. Now, your draft went a lot faster than my draft because your draft is almost done. Mine, and it's a 6-round draft. Mine is just kicked off 5th round, but in the 4th round, pick comes to me. I kicked around if Jake Ryan had lasted. I really wanted Paul Dawson to somehow hang around, and just didn't work for me. Dawson goes at the end of the 3rd round, and so I'm thinking potentially if Jake Ryan's there, he went 2 picks before me. I'm not really worried about it though. I again, not really too concerned with the IDP spots. So DeAndre Smelter was there, and for me, this is kind of crazy because I think this guy, for me, I would have given him a second round grade in this draft, and for me to get him at the 54th pick overall at pick 406, it's a huge steal. Now he's going to start the season probably on the PUP. It's a very similar situation to Todd Gurley, but the upside of this player, even in San Francisco, is pretty enormous. He's got that big body type. He's a typical Georgia Tech wide receiver. Maybe a little bit raw, but huge athleticism, and a pick that I absolutely had to make, even though I don't have any need whatsoever at wide receiver. That was the third wide receiver I took in this draft. He was by far the best value on the board, so for me, it was a no-brainer pick. And then from there, things start to really thin out. Ross, just to give everybody a little bit of the thought process of, I'm up in a couple picks here. There's a few players that I'd be looking for. There are a few running backs still left on the board, and a couple of them that really stick out to me. Zach Zenner, the smart scorer superstar.
Zenner gets taken 2 picks before I pick in my draft. I think he gets picked just before the Huntley pick, if you have a look. Because he's a guy I was locked in on, and we've talked about my need at running back. So I think Zenner was my guy, and when he went, I had to go Huntley top of my board.
Yeah, Zach Zenner, he'd be on that list. I'd also be looking at Thomas Rawls in Seattle and Malcolm Brown in St. Louis. Now, the thing about each of these players is, we don't know if they're ultimately going to stick with the team they're currently on. Zenner in Detroit, Rawls in Seattle, like I said, St. Louis for Malcolm Brown, the other Malcolm Brown. And yet, by the time we get through camp, maybe they end up elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying they get cut, but maybe if, they're trying to sneak onto a practice squad, another team might snatch them up. We've seen similar things happen in the past. We saw it happen with LeGarrette Blount, right? So these things could happen. You take a flyer on these guys later in the draft, and maybe you wind up with a player who could see significant snaps in the season. We don't know. So those are the 3 running backs that would stick out to me. It's a few picks until I draft, or until my next pick. So hopefully one of them sticks around and it doesn't go all 3 right in a row. But I get a feeling I'll get a sniff at one of those players. IDP at this point has really dried up. The well's dried up for me, and I'm probably just going to take flyers on offensive players going forward here. So if you want to follow along with that, you can tweet out to Ross. Is it an underscore?
No, at Ross Miles NFL.
At Ross Miles NFL. No underscores. So tweet out to Ross at Ross Miles NFL. He'll shoot you the link to his side. Tweet out to me at Jeff Ratcliffe, and I'll shoot you the link to my side. Lots of insight here, lots of names you'll recognize from the industry, so you kind of get to see how people handle this type of draft, and especially this beast of a draft that we're in. Remember, you can access the show on iTunes. You can listen to us on Blog Talk Radio. You can listen to us on Stitcher. You know what we really appreciate? We appreciate your reviews. So if you want to go and give us a couple 5-star reviews across the board, or a thumbs up, or heart us, or whatever you do on these sites, please do. We love the feedback. You can also watch us on the Fantasy Sports Network and on YouTube. Of course, make sure you're following at PFF_fantasy and at PFF radio. So Ross, man, thanks for joining me today.
It was fun. This is the first time we've ever done an offensive podcast, Jeff, and I loved it. We should definitely do some IDP ones soon.
Yeah, we'll kick the boss man. He'll be sidelined with an undisclosed illness or something to that effect. But yeah, we'll do some offense again. We'll get some IDP shows coming soon too, some dynasty shows. So thank you guys for listening. For Pro Football Focus, I'm Jeff. He's Ross, and that's a wrap.